The sky was a beautiful, clear blue over Seoul. It was a normal afternoon. People were leaving work, meeting friends. Children were playing in parks. Then the blue cracked. It split open with a sound like the world tearing in half. An emerald fire rained down. It was not an explosion anyone knew. It was a cleansing. The first bolt struck the National Assembly, and the building did not shatter into rubble. It vaporized. One moment it was there, a symbol of order and debate, and the next, there was only a shimmering crater of molten glass, and a wave of heat that scorched the air for a kilometer. Chin was on duty in the Earth Defense Grid bunker deep beneath Namsan Mountain. Screens flared with catastrophic energy, signatures all over the planet. London, New York, Moscow, Beijing, all hit within seconds of each other. This was not a war of invasion. This was a surgical removal. Report! He yelled, his voice swallowed by the klaxons. A young technician, Miso, was frantically tapping at her console, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on her face. It's everywhere, sir. The networks are gone. Command channels are silent. It's like they knew exactly where to hit. On the main screen, a live feed from a dying satellite showed the alien vessels. They were sleek, predatory things, shaped like scythes, glowing with that same sickly green energy. They moved with a silence that was more terrifying than any roar. They didn't bother with ground troops. They simply hovered and fired, methodically erasing military bases, power grids, communication hubs, and government centers. A new signal overrode all remaining frequencies. The image that flickered onto every screen was avian, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a beak-like mouth. The voice was translated by computers in real time. A flat, emotionless drone. People of Earth, your planetary civilization is a nexus of chaos and uncontrolled expansion. You are a contagion. You are hereby quarantined. You will be silent. Then the broadcast ended. The silence that followed was worse. Above, pilot Kang Soo-min was fighting to stay alive. Her fighter squadron had been scrambled from a base outside the city, but they had been airborne for less than 2 minutes when the first emerald bolts lanced up from the ground. Her wingman, a cheerful man named Jay, simply disappeared in a flash of green light. No debris, just gone. All units, break and engage. Her squadron leader's voice crackled, full of static and fear. But there was nothing to engage. The alien drones were small, fast, and countless. They swarmed like angry insects, their weapons slicing through titanium alloy like it was paper. Soo-min yanked her stick hard to the left, feeling the G-forces press down on her chest. She let loose a missile at a cluster of drones. It detonated, scattering them for a moment, but more poured in to take their place. She saw the base below. The runways were molten rivers. The hangars were collapsing clouds of fire. The Krell were not just attacking. They were systematically dismantling humanity's ability to fight back. A cold, professional fury settled over her panic. She wasn't going to die crying. She was going to die fighting. A proximity alarm screamed in her ear. A Krell-sized ship, larger than the drones, had slipped behind her. She dove, weaving between the shattered skeletons of skyscrapers in downtown Seoul, using the ruins as cover. The alien ship followed, impossibly agile. It was toying with her dot in the bunker. Jin watched the main power flicker and die. Emergency lights cast long, grim shadows. The command center was becoming a tomb. Captain Lee, the senior officer, was bleeding from a head wound, his face pale. Jin, Lee coughed, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. The backup data nexus. In Sector 7. It has the raw telemetry from the first strikes. Partial scans of their drive signatures. Navigational ghosts. It's not much, but it's a thread. Sir, we need to get you to... No time. Lee shoved a small black data drive into Jin's hand. It was still warm. Get this to the rally point. The black cell, if anyone is left. This is the key. Promise me. Jin looked into the captain's desperate eyes and nodded. I promise. Lee slumped back, his job done. Jin turned to Miso. Can you access the old service tunnels? She nodded, sniffling, but her hand steady now on a different console. The map is pre-war. It might be blocked. It's our only chance. Above, Sumin's luck ran out. An emerald graze from the scythe ship melted part of her stabilizer. The fighter shuddered, screaming in protest. She was losing control. She aimed her crippled bird toward the Han River, a last-ditch attempt to ditch in water. As she plummeted, she saw the Krell ship break off. She was beneath its notice now, a dying insect. She hit the water hard, the impact slamming the air from her lungs. Darkness and cold swallowed her. For a moment, there was peace. Then, training kicked in. She fought her harness, kicked free of the sinking cockpit, and broke the surface, gasping. She was in the middle of the river, surrounded by floating ash and the eerie, roaring silence of a murdered city. Jin and Miso moved like rats in the dark. The service tunnel was cramped, hot, and filled with the distant, muffled thunder of more strikes. They could feel the ground tremble. After what felt like hours, they reached a collapsed grate. Jin kicked it open, and they spilled out into the night air. They were on the outskirts of the city, in a park, or what was left of it. The trees were burning torches. The smell was indescribable ozone, melted metal, and something sweetly organic that turned the stomach. In the distance, Seoul was a funeral pyre, its light casting the low-hanging smoke a hellish orange. Miso pointed a trembling finger. Look, a figure was pulling themselves out of the river, crawling onto the muddy bank. It was a pilot, still in a partial flight suit. Jin ran over, Miso close behind. Sumin looked up, expecting an alien, ready to fight with her bare hands. She saw two haggard humans instead. For a long moment, no one spoke. The shared horror was language enough. We need to move, Jin finally said, his voice rough. They'll send sweepers for survivors. Where to? Suman asked, her body shivering from cold and adrenaline. Jin closed his hand around the data drive in his pocket, feeling its sharp edges. He thought of Captain Lee's last words. The black cell. A thread. West, he said, looking at the smoky horizon. We go west. And we find anyone else who is still fighting. He helped Sumin to her feet. The three of them, a soldier, a technician, and a pilot, turned their backs on the burning corpse of their city. They were no longer citizens. They were survivors. And the drive in Jin's pocket felt suddenly very, very heavy. It was no longer just data. It was the first spark of an answer. It was the seed of a terrible future fire. The journey west was a walk through a dead world. Jin, Sumin, and Miso kept to the ruined back roads, scavenging food from abandoned stores and drinking filtered rainwater. They saw other survivors, hollow-eyed and moving like ghosts, but trust was a luxury. The Krell strike had not just broken cities. It had broken the idea of community. The sky was never empty. The scythe ships drifted high above, like vultures, and the smaller drones swept through valleys and towns in silent, deadly patrols. Anyone who gathered in large groups, anyone who tried to broadcast a signal, was erased with that same emerald fire. After 3 weeks, they reached the coordinates. It was nothing. A collapsed highway tunnel in a remote mountain range. Jin felt a cold doubt settle in his stomach. Had Captain Lee been delirious? Was the black cell just a last, hopeful fantasy? Miso, however, was studying her salvaged portable scanner. "There's a power signature," she whispered. "Very faint, very deep. Geothermal, maybe. But it's structured. It's not natural." They found the entrance hidden behind a landslide of rock and dead trees. It looked accidental, but the edges were too precise. Jin located a specific rock, moss-covered and seemingly ordinary. He pressed against it as Lee had told him. With a deep, grinding hum, a section of the mountain wall slid open, revealing a metal airlock and a soft, white light. Inside, they were met not by soldiers, but by two tired-looking people in engineers' coveralls. They were scanned, questioned, and the data drive was taken with a reverence that made Jin's heart ache with a fragile hope. Then they were led down, deep into the heart of the mountain dot. It was not a military base. It was a tomb turned into a womb. The black cell operated from a vast, natural cavern system, now filled with the hum of machinery, the glow of computer banks, and the quiet, intense murmur of people who had lost everything but their minds. There were no flags here, no national uniforms. There were only humans with a single purpose. Commander Day found them in a makeshift infirmary. He was a tall man with a stern, lined face and eyes that held no warmth, only a cold, focused light. He did not thank them. He held up the data drive. Captain Lee was a good man. "This," he said, tapping the drive, "confirms our worst fears and gives us our first real weapon. The Krell didn't just find us. They've done this before. Their navigational data shows residual signatures from 4 other systems. Wiped clean, silent." Su Min, her arm bandaged from a burn, spoke up. "So how do we fight a galactic plague doctor?" Day's lips thinned. "We don't fight them where they are strong. We don't meet their fleet. We show them that quarantine is a two-way street." He gestured for them to follow. He led them to the project's heart. In a cavern so vast its ceiling was lost in darkness, a ship was being built. It was unlike anything Jin had ever seen. It had no sleek lines or obvious weapons. It was angular, dark, and covered in strange, scale-like plates. It looked like a black stone, a piece of the void given shape. "The Unga," Day said. "It means fist in an old tongue. Its armor is designed to scatter their sensors. Its engines are a patchwork of our technology, and theirs." He pointed to a smaller workshop off the main floor. There, surrounded by holograms of spinning, impossible geometries, was engineer Park Hana. She was small, with her hair tied back in a messy bun. Her eyes locked on a fragment of Krell warp core salvaged from a crashed drone. She didn't look up as they entered. "The Krell don't use star charts," Hana said, her voice flat, as if she was talking to herself. "They're faster than light travel. It's not about power. It's about resonance. They tune their drives to a unique quantum harmonic signature emitted by their target star system. It's like a song. Every star sings a different song, and they just match the pitch and slide right in." Miso stepped closer, fascinated. "So to go to their home, you need to sing their star song," Hana finished. She finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, but in their depths burned a fire that had nothing to do with warmth. Jin recognized it. It was the same cold fire he felt. It was hate, refined into a tool. "My family was in Bizen," Hana said, turning back to the hologram. "There is no Bizen now. So I took their pretty music box apart." She manipulated the controls. The hologram changed, showing the harmonious, beautiful wave pattern of a star's signature. Then, with a tap, she introduced a discordant frequency. The waves spasmed, becoming jagged, chaotic, and violently unstable. "And I learned how to make it scream." Day nodded. "Hana's breakthrough is our spear. The data you brought, Jin, is our map. We now have the resonant signature for the Krell home system. The UNGHA will be tuned to it. We will go to their home, not to bomb their cities. Then what? Su Min asked. Jin understood first. He looked from the cold, vengeful light in Hana's eyes to the grim certainty in Day's. The pieces clicked together with a terrible, perfect clarity. "You're not going to attack them," he said, his voice quiet. "You're going to attack their idea of safety. You're going to show them their home isn't a sanctuary anymore." A faint, cold smile touched Day's lips. It was the first emotion Jin had seen on the man's face. "We are going to impose a quarantine of our own. But to do that, the UNGHA needs a crew. Not soldiers, survivors, people who understand the cost." He looked at each of them. The pilot who flew through hell. The technician who kept systems alive. The officer who carried the last order. "You have seen the cleansing fire. Do you want to help us build the answer?" There was no discussion. Su Min, her body still aching, thought of her wingman vanishing in green light. Miso thought of the dying screens in the bunker. Jin thought of Captain Lee's hand going slack. They all looked at Hana, whose entire world was now a weapon. They didn't join a navy. They joined the promise. In the deep, dark heart of the mountain, surrounded by the hum of a waking ship, they began to work. Hana taught Miso the basics of resonant physics. Su Min studied the schematics of the UNGHA's unique needle-like fighter craft. Jin worked with Day on tactics, learning that their only strategy was one of absolute, shocking asymmetry. They would not fight a war. They would deliver a message. Weeks turned into months. The UNGHA grew in its cradle. Its dark hull drank the light. Its modified Krell warp core, built by Hana's grieving, brilliant hands, sat in its belly like a sleeping heart. It was not a ship of hope. It was a ship of reckoning. It was a scalpel, not a sword, being sharpened in the dark for a single, precise, and terrible cut. They were not going to win a battle. They were going to change the rules of the universe for one species, forever. And they were almost ready. The UNGHA did not tear into reality with a roar. It slipped out, a silent black shadow, emerging from the warp stream inside the frosty debris field of the Krell home system's outer asteroid belt. On the bridge, the only light came from the soft glow of consoles and the hard, distant gleam of a strange sun. Jin stood at the tactical station, his fingers hovering over the controls. The data scrolling before him was impossible. No long-range challenges. No patrol sweeps. They're complacent. Commander Day stood in the center, hands clasped behind his back. They believe their quarantine is absolute. They believe no sick animal can leave its cage. Arrogance is a universal weakness. He turned to Hana at the engineering console. The harmonic cloak? Hana's eyes were fixed on her readings. The UNGHA's warp core now emitted a perfect, mimic copy of the local star's resonant signature. To any Krell sensor looking for the discordant noise of a foreign vessel, they were invisible, just another piece of the system's natural background song. Cloak is stable. We are a ghost. Su Min's voice came from the fighter bay. Raptor Squadron is secured and prepped. No signs of detection. She was down there, strapped into her new fighter, a sleek, black craft designed for stealth and speed, not for dogfights. Its purpose was reconnaissance, and if needed, a desperate defense. For days, they watched. They drifted among the rocks, passively collecting every signal, every ship movement. They saw the Krell civilization not as a monolithic war machine, but as a living society. Large, graceful transports moved between planets. Orbital habitats glittered like delicate glass flowers. On the main world, Krell Prime, they saw sprawling cities of crystalline spires that caught the light of their blue sun, not with harsh reflections, but with soft, prismatic glows. There were parks. There were patterns of moving lights that suggested traffic, order, life. The sight hit the crew like a physical blow. Miso, at the communication station, was the first to voice it, her whisper loud in the quiet bridge. They have children. She had isolated a video feed from a planetary network. It showed Krell younglings, smaller, with fluffier plumage, playing in a zero-gravity garden under the watchful eyes of adults. The adults looked peaceful. There was no visible malice, no hint of the cold ferocity that had burned Seoul and 100 other cities. A thick, heavy silence filled the Anga. Jin saw Sumin's hands tighten into fists on her console feed image. He saw Hana look away from the screen, her jaw clenched, her shoulders stiff. The cold fire of vengeance in his own heart sputtered. Confused by this new fuel, they observed them all, his expression unchanging. "You see parks and think they are not monsters," he said, his voice low and even. "They saw our parks, our children playing, and they called it chaos. They saw our cities and called them a contagion. Their beauty does not erase our ashes. Their peace is built on the silence they imposed on others. But we're not like them," Jin said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "Are we? We came here to. We came here to ensure survival," they finished for him. "Their compassion, if it exists, did not extend to us. Ours cannot extend to them at the cost of our entire species. This is not about punishment. It is about prevention. Remember the data, the 4 silent systems. Those were someone else's children once." The moral clarity they had carried from the mountain shattered, leaving behind sharp, painful fragments. They were not soldiers facing soldiers. They were survivors holding a knife to the throat of a civilization that included beings who had never fired a weapon, who might even disagree with the cleansing. The plan felt different now. Heavier, their debate was cut short by a sharp alarm from Miso's station. "Energy spike. A Krell picket ship. It's altering course. It's on a routine sweep, but its path will bring it within 5,000 kilometers. Too close." Hana's head snapped up. "The harmonic cloak is perfect, but if they get a visual, they'll see a rock that shouldn't be there," they finished. Battle stations, quietly. The crew moved, driven by training overruling doubt. Jin powered the UNGHA's passive sensors to full, painting the approaching vessel. It was a small, elegant ship, a scanner platform. It drifted closer, unaware. 3,000 kilometers, Miso reported, her voice tight. "They're launching a standard sensor pulse." The pulse washed over the Anga. On the bridge, they held their breath. The cloak held against the active scan. But then, on the visual feed, they saw the Krell ship slow. A focused optical telescope on its hull swiveled. It was looking right at them. "They have visual confirmation," Jin said. "They're hailing their command." Day didn't hesitate. "Zoom in, scramble, intercept that transmission." "Blind them?" "Jin, plot us a warp jump out of the belt, but do not engage." "Not yet." In the bay, Su-min felt her fighter drop away from the UNGHA. Her craft, painted matte black, was virtually invisible against the starfield. She pushed the engines, feeling a surge of adrenaline that was pure and clean. This was a fight, she understood. She closed the distance fast, her targeting system locking onto the delicate sensor array of the Krell ship. The Krell vessel, finally realizing the threat, began to turn, its own weapons powering up. Emerald light glowed at its tips. Su-min fired. Not plasma bolts, but high-velocity kinetic slugs designed to puncture and shatter without explosive energy signatures. The Krell ship's array disintegrated into silent shards. Its hail to command died in the void, but the engagement had been seen. On the far side of the asteroid belt, 2 larger, scythe-shaped warships changed course. They moved with terrifying speed, green fire already building at their prows. "Warp jump is ready," Jin called out. "Recall Su-min," they ordered. Now, Su-min saw the warships on her scope. She saw the UNGHA, a dark slab against the stars, beginning to glow with the building energy of its own warp drive. She could run. She could make it. But the warships would be right behind them, and a warp chase near a star was suicide. They would be cut down before they could deliver their message. Her decision was instant. It was not a decision of hate, or even of vengeance for Bizon or Sol. It was the decision of a pilot protecting her ship. "Raptor Squadron," she said, her voice calm over the dedicated channel. "Engage the hostiles. By the UNGHA time. Do not let them follow." Su-min, no. Jin's voice shouted over the comm. She switched it off. She saw the other 5 fighters of her squadron, piloted by men and women who had also lost everything, fall in beside her. They did not speak. They turned as one and flew, not at the warships, but into the path between the warships and the UNGHA. They were gnats facing eagles. Their kinetic weapons peppered the lead warship's shields, causing minor flares of disruption, little more than an annoyance. The Krell response was swift and merciless. Emerald beams lanced out. One fighter vanished. Then another. Su-min twisted and weaved, feeling the heat of a near miss scorch her hull. She fired her last slugs into a warship's engine port, seeing a satisfying flash of secondary explosions. A beam caught her starboard wing, shearing it clean off. Her fighter spun, tumbling out of control. The last thing she saw on her screen was the UNGHA, surrounded by a shimmering bubble of warped space, wink out of existence. They had made the jump. They were safe. The lead Krell warship turned its attention to her crippled, spinning craft. It moved in close, perhaps to capture, perhaps to examine. Su-min smiled a hard, thin smile inside her helmet. With her last bit of control, she triggered the self-destruct of her fighter's small power core. It wasn't a green cleansing fire. It was a simple, human explosion of white-hot metal and fury, a final, bright spark in the dark of the Krell's own sanctuary, on the bridge of the UNGHA. Now hurtling through the void, the silence was absolute. The feed from Su-min's fighter had gone dark. The screens showed the empty warp stream. They had the data. They had confirmed the target. They had their precious, terrible chance. But the cost was now a name. It was a face. It was a pilot who had chosen a quiet, defiant end over a silent, safe retreat. The mission was no longer just a tactical plan from a mountain bunker. It was blood debt paid in advance. They were no longer just messengers. They were bearers of a price that had just gone up. And somewhere ahead, in the calm blue light of an alien sun, that price would be collected. The UNGHA tore itself out of warp space far from the asteroid belt, deep in the empty reaches on the other side of the Krell sun. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring. One of the new, untested dampeners had failed during the emergency jump. The air smelled of ozone and burnt wiring that no one cared about the damage. On the bridge, the silence was a physical weight. Jin's hands were clenched on his console, his knuckles white. He could still see the last flicker of Su-min's signal on his mind's eye. Miso was crying quietly at her station, her shoulders shaking as she tried to reroute power. Hana worked with a terrifying, silent focus, her face a stone mask, shutting down the damaged systems one by one. Only Commander Day seemed unchanged. He stood staring at the main viewer, which showed the calm blue disk of the Krell star. "Status," he said, his voice cutting through the grief like a knife. "Secondary power offline. Harmonic cloak is destabilized." "We have a fix on our position," Jin reported, forcing the words out. "The Krell fleet is mobilizing. They know we're here." They're converging on our last known location in the belt. We have maybe hours before search patterns find us. A nodded. Good. They are looking in the wrong place. Hana, is the weapon ready? Hannah looked up. The cold fire in her eyes was now an inferno. The resonator torpedo is armed. It will function. But, Commander, the solar model. We predicted a 60% chance of success from the asteroid belt. From this distance, and with our damaged systems, the targeting variables are. They are what they are, they interrupted. We do not have the luxury of perfect odds. We have one shot. This is no longer just about sending a message. It is about finishing what Su Min and the others died to allow. He turned to Jin. Plot the firing solution. Maximum range. We hit the star and we leave. Immediately. Jin's fingers flew over his console, calling up the complex astrophysical model Hana had built. He input their new coordinates, the star's mass, its current flare activity. The numbers spun resolved. His blood went cold. Sir? At this range and angle, the projected coronal mass ejection. It's larger. The model predicts it won't just hit their shipyards and grids. The leading edge of the plasma wave will envelope Krell Prime itself. The radiation surge on the Dayside continent. It will be lethal for anything unprotected. He looked up, meeting Day's gaze. He was no longer just stating a fact. He was asking a question. Are we doing this? Are we becoming the cleansing fire? Day walked over and looked at the data. For a long moment, he was silent. The hum of the damaged ship filled the bridge. Then he spoke, not to Jin, but to Hana. Engineer Park, your family in Bizen, were they soldiers? Hana's mask cracked. A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. No, she whispered. Mine were in Seoul, Day said, his voice still low, but now it carried a tremor of something raw. Teachers. My sister was a musician. He looked back at the star on the screen. The Krell High Command saw them as data points in a chaotic pattern. Noise to be silenced. We are not them. We are delivering a consequence, not an extermination. He turned to me so. Can you piggyback a tight beam transmission on the torpedo's carrier wave? A message direct to Krell High Command? Miso wiped her face, sniffling. Why, yes, for a few seconds as it flies. Do it. Bay looked at Jin. Adjust the solution. Target the star's northern magnetic pole. It will skew the ejection, minimize direct planetary impact. It will still scour their orbitals clean. It will still plunge their world into a dark age. But it will give their civilians a chance to reach shelters. A chance my sister did not get. The order was a mercy, so thin it was almost cruel. But it was a line. It was the difference between a warning and a genocide. Jin felt a knot in his chest loosen just a fraction. He adjusted the numbers. The probability of a crippling, non-exterminating strike fell to 40%. It was the best he could do. Solution locked, he said. Weapon is ready, Hana confirmed. Message is loaded, Miso whispered. They took his place in the center of the bridge. He looked old and tired and utterly resolved. Fire. Jin pressed the key deep in the UNGHA's belly. A bay door slid open. The resonator torpedo was not explosive. It was a sleek silver needle, packed with a powerful harmonic broadcaster. It shot forth on a plume of conventional thrust, then coasted silently toward the vast blue star. As it flew, it broadcast Miso's recorded message on a loop, aimed at the Krell command frequencies. Inside the torpedo, Hana's machine began to sing. It didn't just mimic the star's song. It screamed it. It took the pure, stable harmonic resonance of the Krell sun and flooded it with amplified, chaotic discord. It was like dragging a fingernail down the universe's largest chalkboard. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, on the UNGA sensors, they saw it. The star's surface rippled. A sunspot, vast and ugly, loomed at the precise point of magnetic intrusion. Fiery arcs of plasma, larger than planets, twisted and gathered. It's working. Hana breathed, her scientific awe cutting through her hate. The instability is propagating exactly as modeled. Warp drive status. Day barked, spooling with the damaged dampener. Hana warned, "We jump the moment we have confirmation of ejection." No sooner, no later. They watched, helpless and powerful, as their weapon did its work. The beautiful, calm blue star now had a raging, darker blue sore at its crown. Energy built, a cosmic storm contained by gravity alone. Then it was released. A wave of superheated plasma, a coronal mass ejection of terrifying precision and magnitude, erupted from the star. It moved in a focused cone, like the blast from a cosmic shotgun, aimed directly at the orbital plane where Krell Prime and its shipyards hung. On the bridge, alarms screened a new warning. The leading edge of the shockwave will reach us in 90 seconds. Warp field is unstable. Jin yelled. Bay didn't take his eyes off the viewer. On a secondary screen, fed by long-range telescopes, they saw the first effects. The elegant Krell orbital shipyards, moments ago bustling with light, were bathed in an actinic white glare. Their delicate structures twisted, melted, and vaporized. The planetary defense grid flared and went dark. Across the night side of Krell Prime, cities glittered. Then, the wave of charged particles and radiation washed over the day side. The planet's magnetic field screamed under the stress, creating auroras of deadly beauty across its entire sky. Every unshielded electronic system on the surface would be fried. Every power grid would melt. The sky itself would become a killing field for anything caught outside. They had not bombed the city. They had turned off their enemy's sun, just for a moment, and let its natural fury do the work. Jump now. Day commanded. Hana slammed the controls. The UNGA's damaged warp core groaned in protest. Space around the ship twisted, but the coming solar shockwave was already distorting local spacetime. The ship shuddered, pieces of its outer hull tearing away. For a terrifying second, Jin thought they would be ripped apart, swallowed by the very storm they had created. Then, with a sickening lurch, the Unga vanished, leaving behind only the expanding wave of silent, fiery annihilation and Miso's tight beam message, now playing into a terrified and suddenly silent Krell Command Network dot. The message showed the predictive model of the solar flare. It showed the UNGHA's targeting data. It showed the careful, precise adjustment that pulled the aim away from total planetary annihilation. And Day's voice, translated into their cold language, spoke the final words. You struck our home to silence us. We strike yours with a warning. Your quarantine is now your cage. Your technology is now your tomb. You will look at the stars through a wall of fire we control. Your silence will be eternal. The UNGHA was gone. Left behind was a civilization that had known only power and order. Now plunged into screaming darkness, their empire severed in a single star-fed stroke. The cleansing fire had been answered, not with more fire, but with the cold, calculated theft of their future. The UNGHA did not return to cheers. It limped back to the lunar shipyard, its black hull scarred and pitted, one engine dead. It was met by silence and salutes from the few who remained in the hidden base. The crew disembarked not as conquering heroes, but as ghosts. They had seen the solar flares rage on their scopes. They knew what they had done. On Earth, the news spread slowly through the rebuilt networks. The Krell attacks had stopped. The scythe ships had withdrawn from the sky. The constant, fearful watching of the heavens eased. Humanity, shattered and bleeding, began the long, painful work of digging out from the rubble. There were no parades for Day, Jin, Hana, or Miso. Their names were known only to a few. Their victory was too dark, too terrible to celebrate. It was a necessary monster, and it was best left in the shadows. Years passed. Seoul was not rebuilt as it was. It grew anew, with lower buildings and stronger foundations, a city that remembered it could be broken. In a quiet office in one of these new structures, Jin, now with streaks of gray in his hair, adjusted the collar of his formal jacket. He was no longer an officer. He was an ambassador. His uniform was a simple dark suit. Miso, his aide, placed a data slate before him. The final scans from the Sentinel array are confirmed. Krell Prime's industrial output is at pre-industrial levels. Their off-world colonies are isolated. They are rebuilding, but slowly. They are using wind and water power. No fusion. No warp signatures beyond the hospital ships we permit. Jin nodded. He looked out the window at the new city. Children were playing in a park below. The sound of their laughter, once a target, was now just a sound of life. And the Harbinger network? He asked, his voice quiet. Active and unseen, Miso said. 10,000 stealth mines, each broadcasting a chaotic harmonic signature, hidden in the asteroid belts of every Krell system. If they try to build a warp-capable warship, if they try to sing a song that isn't for peace, the nearest mine will scream. It will trigger a solar flare event in their local star, just like we did. The protocols are automatic. It requires no human order. It was the eternal watch. Not an occupation, not a rule. A leash. A boundary written in the fabric of their stars. It's time, Miso said softly. Jin took a deep breath and left the office. He was flown to a neutral station, a simple metal donut spinning in the void between stars. The meeting room was bare, with a table and 2 chairs. He sat and waited. The Krell envoy entered. It was smaller than the warriors they had seen years ago. Its plumage was dull, without luster. It moved slowly, with a careful dignity that spoke of deep loss and hard lessons. It sat across from him. No translators were needed now. Both languages had been learned in the ashes. We have come, the Krell envoy said, its voice a soft clicking that was translated by a small device on the table, to discuss terms of peace, to discuss aid. Our people suffer. The great silence you imposed has ended, but the darkness remains. Jin listened. He saw not a monster, but a representative of a broken world. He saw Su-Min's face in his mind. He saw Captain Lee's hand going slack. He saw Hana's tear in the torchlight of the cavern. The suffering was immense, the envoy continued, a hint of something like pleading in its tone. Unimaginable. We did not understand. We thought we were pruning chaos. We were wrong. We asked for a chance to rebuild, to live. Jin waited until the envoy was finished. He did not speak of forgiveness. He did not speak of his own dead. He slid the data slate Miso had given him across the smooth surface of the table. The Krell envoy took it, its delicate hands trembling slightly. The slate activated. It showed a real-time map of their home system. Then it zoomed out and out and out. A map of every Krell star system glowed, and in each one, a tiny pulsing red dot blinked in the asteroid belt. 10,000 red dots. A galaxy of silent, patient guns pointed at the heart of every Krell sun. This is our peace, Jin said, his voice as quiet and cold as the space outside the station. We do not occupy your worlds. We do not govern your people. We do not take your resources. We only watch. He leaned forward slightly. The moment your civilization develops a warp signature that is not for the approved hospital ships or diplomatic envoys, the song will become a scream again. The star of that system will flare. Your progress will be reset. You struck first to silence what you feared. We have made sure you will never have the chance to strike again. Your safety is now bound to your stillness. The Krell envoy stared at the slate, its body rigid with horror. It understood. This was not a treaty. It was a life sentence. Their empire, their destiny to the stars, was over. They would live, they would rebuild, but they would never again reach beyond their own skies. They were permanent children, grounded forever. You would make us prisoners in our own systems? The envoy whispered, the click of its language sounding broken. No, Jin said, standing up. He looked down at the being whose species had once held the power of life and death over his own. We are not your jailers. We are your mirror. You are prisoners of the consequence you chose. Guard this peace. It is the only one you will ever get. He turned and walked to the door. He did not look back. He did not need to see the despair to know it was there. It was a despair humanity had known, huddled in bunkers and burning cities. Now it was their turn to live with it. Outside, in the corridor, Mi-So was waiting. She fell into step beside him. The shuttle is ready, she said. He nodded. They walked in silence back to the human section of the station. Ahead, through a viewport, he could see the sleek, gray shape of their ship, and beyond it, the swirling blue and green marble of Earth, alive, noisy, chaotic, and free. They had not won a war. They had ended the possibility of one. They had traded the glory of conquest for the grim duty of an eternal guard. They had become the keepers of a silent, terrible promise made in the ruins of Seoul and paid for in the cold fire of an alien sun. They boarded the shuttle. The airlock sealed. As the engines hung to life, Jin took one last look at the station, where a shattered civilization now understood the true, final cost of striking first. There were no flags. There were no victories. There was only the watch stretching out forever beneath the silent, singing stars.